Ramon Diaz was 32 years old, and 3 months ago he made a decision that would expose the true nature of his wife's family. He decided to act like someone he wasn't, someone poor, simple, maybe even a little naive. And what he discovered about Emma's family would change everything about their marriage. It started on a Thursday evening in late September 2024, when Emma nervously adjusted her pearl necklace in the passenger seat of Ramon's 15-year-old Honda Civic. They were driving to her parents' estate in Greenwich Hills for the first time since the wedding, and she'd been unusually quiet for the past 20 minutes. The thing was, Ramon and Emma had eloped 6 weeks earlier. They'd met at a coffee shop in the Riverside district, fallen deeply in love over the course of 8 months, and decided to get married at the courthouse with just 2 friends as witnesses. Emma had insisted on keeping it simple, quiet, intimate. She'd said her family was complicated and that she wanted their marriage to be about them, not about impressing anyone else. Ramon had thought it was romantic. Now, driving toward the imposing gates of her family's estate, he was starting to understand there was more to the story. They're traditional, Emma said finally, her voice tight. Very focused on success, stability, you know. They're going to have opinions about us getting married without them there. Ramon knew. Over the past 6 weeks of marriage, Emma had finally opened up about her family. Her father, Richard Whitmore, was a commercial real estate developer who'd built a portfolio worth somewhere in the 8 figures. Her mother, Catherine, came from old money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. Her older brother, Preston, worked in private equity and apparently never let anyone forget it. What Emma didn't know, what nobody knew except Ramon's attorney and his accountant, was that he'd spent the last 8 years building a software company that had just been acquired by a major tech corporation for $47 million. His share, after investors and employees, left him with just over $28 million. He drove this beat-up Civic by choice. He wore jeans and plain shirts by choice. And he worked as a freelance consultant because he genuinely enjoyed solving problems for smaller companies without the pressure of running a large operation. But he wasn't going to lead with that information, not with Emma's family. Something about the way she'd been anxious for weeks, the way she'd carefully coached him on what to wear, what to say, what not to mention about his work. It had triggered an instinct he'd developed over years of being underestimated in business. He wanted to see who these people really were. And more importantly, he wanted to see how they would treat his wife when they thought she'd married beneath her station. Traditional how? Ramon asked, downshifting as they turned onto a tree-lined private road. Just don't mention that you rent your apartment, okay? And maybe don't talk too much about the consulting work. They might not understand the freelance economy. She reached over and squeezed his hand. I love you exactly as you are, Ramon, but they can be judgmental, especially about me marrying someone they haven't vetted. There it was, the real anxiety. Emma wasn't just worried about them judging Ramon. She was worried about them judging her choice. The gates to the Whitmore estate swung open automatically as they approached. The driveway curved through manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain monthly than most people's mortgages. The house itself was a modern colonial, all white stone and black shutters, with columns that seemed designed to intimidate. Emma's mother answered the door in a cream cashmere sweater set that probably cost what Ramon was pretending to make in a month. She looked at Emma with an expression that was equal parts relief and reproach, then turned to Ramon with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So you must be the husband, Catherine said, her gaze sweeping over his department store khakis and basic button-down shirt. How nice to finally meet you. Please come in. No hug for Emma, no congratulations. Just a tight-lipped assessment that made Ramon's jaw clench. If you enjoy stories of shocking family revelations, sweet social revenge, and underdogs who outsmart the wealthy elite, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. And tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. The interior of the house was exactly what Ramon had expected. Expensive neutral tones, abstract art that was probably worth six figures, furniture that looked like it came from a museum. Richard Whitmore stood in the living room, a glass of what Ramon assumed was very expensive scotch in his hand. He was tall, silver-haired, with a kind of authoritative presence that came from decades of people doing exactly what he said. "Emma," he said, his voice cool, "we were surprised to get your call. 6 weeks of marriage before we even meet your husband?" He turned to Ramon, extending his hand for a firm shake that lasted just a beat too long, a dominance play Ramon recognized from countless business negotiations. "Ramon Diaz, I've tried to look you up, but you don't seem to have much of a digital footprint." That was intentional. After the acquisition, Ramon had scrubbed most of his online presence, tired of the constant pitches and networking requests. But Richard's tone suggested he'd interpreted the absence as insignificance. "I keep a pretty low profile, sir," Ramon said, playing his role. "So I'm not really into social media and all that." "Clearly," Catherine murmured, gesturing for them to sit on a pristine white sofa that looked like it had never been actually used. Preston arrived 20 minutes later in a silver Porsche 911, because of course he did. He was 35, dressed in expensive casual wear that screamed wealth without trying, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He looked at Emma with what might have been concern, then at Ramon with open assessment. "So this is the guy who convinced my little sister to run off and get married in secret," Preston said, shaking Ramon's hand with just enough pressure to make a point. "Must have been quite the courtship." "We fell in love," Emma said quietly, and Ramon heard the defensive note in her voice that made his heart ache for her. "How romantic," Catherine said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "Shall we move to the dining room? I'm sure we all have a lot to discuss." The dining room was designed to intimidate, a table that could seat 16 beneath a crystal chandelier, place settings that probably cost more than Ramon's supposed monthly rent. The food was served by a woman Ramon assumed was household staff: lobster bisque, filet mignon, roasted vegetables that looked like art. "So, Ramon," Richard said once they were all settled, cutting into his steak with surgical precision, "Emma mentioned you're in consulting?" Ramon shifted in his chair, letting himself look slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "Yeah, I do freelance tech consulting, help small businesses with their computer systems, website issues, that kind of thing. It's pretty flexible work." "Freelance," Preston repeated, exchanging a look with his father. "So no stable income then? No benefits package? No retirement plan?" "Preston," Emma said sharply, but Ramon touched her hand gently. "It's okay, Em. They're fair questions." He turned back to Preston. "No traditional benefits, no, but I make enough to get by. Keep the lights on, pay rent. It's not glamorous, but it works for us." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Rent," she said, as if the word itself was distasteful. "And where exactly do you rent?" "Riverside District. It's a nice area, lots of young professionals. My apartment's nothing fancy, one bedroom, about 800 square feet, but it's home." What he didn't mention was that he owned the entire 6-story building, a mixed-use property he'd purchased 2 years ago as an investment. His apartment was actually the renovated penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop terrace. But they didn't need to know that. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Ramon with the kind of cold calculation usually reserved for business deals gone bad. "You know, Ramon, when a man gets married, he takes on certain responsibilities. Providing for his wife, building a stable future, ensuring she has the life she deserves." "Dad," Emma said, her voice strained, "I'm just being honest, sweetheart. You grew up in a certain environment. You're accustomed to certain standards." He turned back to Ramon. "What exactly are your financial goals? Your 5-year plan? Your career trajectory?" Ramon had negotiated with venture capitalists, squared off against corporate lawyers, and sold his company for tens of millions of dollars. But right now, he played the part of a man who'd never been in a room like this before. I guess I just want to make enough to keep Emma happy. Maybe save up for a down payment on a small house someday. I'm not really a big planner, sir. I kind of take things as they come. The look of disappointment on Richard's face was almost theatrical. Catherine actually closed her eyes briefly, as if in pain. Take things as they come, Preston said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Emma, did you two discuss any of this before you got married? Did you talk about finances, goals, what kind of life you want to build? We talked about what matters, Emma said, her voice stronger now. We talked about loving each other, about being partners, about building a life based on what we value, not what other people expect. What you value, Catherine repeated. And what exactly do you value, Emma? Living in an 800-square-foot apartment in the Riverside district? Worrying about rent every month? Having a husband with no ambition beyond getting by? Ramon felt Emma tense beside him, and it took every ounce of his self-control not to drop the act right then and there. But he needed to see how far this would go. He needed to understand exactly who these people were. Mrs. Whitmore, he said carefully, I know I'm probably not what you hoped for Emma, but I love your daughter, and I'll do everything I can to make her happy. Love, Richard said, swirling his scotch. That's admirable, Ramon, truly. But love doesn't pay for private school tuition when you have children. It doesn't cover medical emergencies. It doesn't maintain the lifestyle Emma grew up with. Maybe I don't want that lifestyle, Emma said suddenly, her voice cracking slightly. Maybe I wanted something real. Something that wasn't about money and status and impressing people. The hurt on Catherine's face was genuine, Ramon noticed. Beneath the judgment and the snobbery, there was actual pain that her daughter had shut her out. We just want what's best for you, sweetheart, Catherine said softly, and we're concerned that you've made a rash decision. You barely knew this man, and now you're married to him, living in his tiny apartment, dependent on his inconsistent income. I'm not dependent on anyone, Emma said. I have my own job at the marketing firm. I'm not some helpless trophy wife. A marketing coordinator position, Preston interjected. Making what, $52,000 a year? Between the two of you, you're probably barely clearing $90,000 combined. That's less than what Mom spends on charity galas in a year. Ramon watched the numbers sink in around the table, the casual revelation of Catherine's charitable spending being more than his and Emma's supposed combined income. It was meant to shame them both. We managed just fine, Ramon said quietly. Emma's happy. That's what matters to me. Richard stood up abruptly, walking to the bar cart in the corner of the dining room. He poured himself another scotch, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he turned back, his expression was that of a man about to make a business proposition. Ramon, let me be frank with you, man to man. He took a long sip of his drink. I built my business from smart investments and strategic partnerships. I understand people, and I can see that you're well-meaning. You seem to care about Emma, but caring isn't enough. Richard, Catherine said, a warning in her voice. No, Catherine, they need to hear this. He looked directly at Ramon. I'm prepared to make you an offer. A one-time payment of $150,000. In exchange, you agree to a quiet annulment. No drama, no fighting. Emma comes home, takes some time to figure out what she really wants, and you go back to your consulting work. Everyone moves on with their lives. The room went completely silent. Ramon felt Emma's hand grip his so tightly it almost hurt. You're offering to pay my husband to leave me? Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, but it shook with fury. I'm offering to give a young man a significant financial opportunity, Richard said calmly. Think about it, Ramon. $150,000. That's more than you probably make in 2 years. You could pay off any debts, get a better apartment, maybe even start a real business instead of this freelance situation. And Emma gets a chance to really think about whether she wants a life of financial struggle. Get out, Emma said suddenly, standing up. Ramon, we're leaving. Now. But Ramon stayed seated, looking at Richard with an expression that revealed nothing of what he was thinking. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did. That's a lot of money, sir, he said slowly. Can I ask why you think your daughter's marriage is worth that specific amount? Because I've done the math, Richard said bluntly. I've calculated what it would cost me in peace of mind, in family harmony, in knowing my daughter won't spend the next decade struggling financially. $150,000 is a bargain compared to watching Emma's potential wasted on a mediocre life. Preston actually nodded in agreement. Catherine looked uncomfortable, but didn't object. Ramon, let's go, Emma said again, tears in her eyes now. Please. Ramon stood slowly, taking Emma's hand. He looked at each member of her family in turn. Richard with his smug confidence, Catherine with her genteel disappointment, Preston with his barely concealed contempt. Thank you for dinner, he said politely. And thank you for the offer, Mr. Whitmore. It's given me a lot to think about. The drive back to the Riverside district was silent except for Emma's quiet crying. Ramon kept one hand on the wheel and held hers with the other, his mind working through everything he'd witnessed. When they finally pulled into the parking garage of his building, Emma turned to him, her eyes red. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I knew they'd be bad, but I didn't think they'd try to pay you to leave me. Ramon pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake against him. Hey, look at me. When she met his eyes, he continued, Nothing they said changes anything about how I feel about you. You know that, right? But they're right about some things, she said miserably. I did grow up with money. I am used to a certain lifestyle, and we are living in a small apartment on combined incomes that barely— Emma, he interrupted gently. Do you trust me? She nodded without hesitation. Then I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before, but I wanted— He paused, choosing his words carefully. I wanted to make sure you love me for me, not for what I have. Emma's brow furrowed in confusion. What are you talking about? Ramon took a deep breath. The freelance consulting work is real. I do help small businesses, but that's not all I do. Actually, it's just a hobby now. He pulled out his phone, opening his banking app and turning it toward her. This is my checking account balance, and this, he swiped to another screen, is one of my investment accounts. Emma stared at the numbers, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. Ramon, this says you have a little over $28 million in liquid assets, yes, plus real estate holdings, including this building we're parked under. He watched her try to process the information. 8 years ago, I started a software company. 6 months ago, it was acquired by a major tech corporation. The sale closed in April. You're a multi-millionaire? Emma's voice was faint. I'm your husband who happens to have money, Ramon corrected. Money I made by being underestimated for years, by wearing jeans to investor meetings and driving old cars to negotiations. People always thought I was just some kid with a laptop and they'd get careless. They'd show their true colors. Emma's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The dinner tonight, you played them. You let them think you were poor on purpose. I let them show you who they really are, Ramon said quietly, because you needed to see it, Emma. You needed to see that their love comes with conditions, with price tags, with the requirement that you live up to their standards instead of your own. Emma was silent for a long moment, staring at the numbers on his phone screen. Then, unexpectedly, she started laughing. It was a slightly hysterical sound, but genuine. My father just offered you $150,000 to leave me, she said, shaking her head. And you have $28 million. Oh my God. Oh my God, Ramon. The look on his face when he finds out. If he finds out, Ramon said carefully, that's up to you. We can tell them tomorrow, or we can wait. We can play this however you want to play it. Emma looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. The tears were gone, replaced by something sharper. Something that reminded Ramon why he'd fallen in love with this woman in the first place. She was brilliant when she was angry. How much time do we have before your next investor meeting or business obligation? She asked. I'm completely free for the next 6 months. I'm taking time off after the acquisition. A slow smile spread across Emma's face. Then I think we should wait. I think we should play this out a little longer, because I want to see exactly how far they'll go. I want to know the truth about my family. Ramon felt a surge of pride in his wife. What did you have in mind? Oh, I have a lot in mind, Emma said, her voice taking on a determined edge. But first, I think we should move into the penthouse properly. I want to see this 800-square-foot apartment that's apparently ruining my life. Ramon grinned. It's actually about 3,200 square feet, but who's counting? As they rode the elevator up to the top floor, Ramon knew that what came next would be complicated, messy, possibly painful for Emma when she fully understood the depth of her family's conditional love. But they would face it together. What Richard Whitmore didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Ramon Diaz hadn't just built a successful company. He'd built it by being strategic, patient, and 3 steps ahead of everyone who underestimated him. And he was about to teach the Whitmore family a lesson they'd never forget. The next morning, Emma woke up in the penthouse that Ramon had been calling his modest apartment for the past 6 weeks. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Riverside district, illuminating hardwood floors, custom built-ins, and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. She'd spent half the night exploring the space, the office with dual monitors and a view of the river, the master bathroom with its rainfall shower and soaking tub, the rooftop terrace with its garden and outdoor kitchen. Ramon had renovated it himself over the past 2 years, he'd explained, because he enjoyed the work and liked having a project that wasn't about profit margins and quarterly reports. I still can't believe you let me complain about cabinet space for 3 weeks, Emma said, pouring coffee in a kitchen that had more storage than her childhood bedroom. Ramon looked up from his laptop, grinning. To be fair, you were complaining about the cabinet space in the guest bedroom we were using while I finished some renovations up here. That kitchenette really is small. You're impossible, she said, but she was smiling. Then her phone buzzed on the marble countertop. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. Emma put it on speaker. Hello, Mom. Emma, darling. Catherine's voice was warm, conciliatory, a dramatic shift from last night's icy disappointment. I hope you and Ramon made it home safely. Your father and I felt terrible about how dinner ended. We were hoping you both might come back today for brunch. Just the 4 of us. We'd like to clear the air. Ramon raised an eyebrow. Emma bit her lip, thinking, let me talk to Ramon and call you back. Of course, sweetheart. We love you. We just want what's best for you. After she hung up, Ramon closed his laptop. That was fast. Less than 12 hours and they're already trying damage control. They're worried I'll cut them off completely, Emma said quietly. I did it once before, when I was 23. Didn't speak to them for almost a year after they tried to break up a relationship they didn't approve of. What happened? He was a teacher, made $43,000 a year, and loved his job. My father offered him $50,000 to break up with me, and he actually considered it. Emma's jaw tightened at the memory. When I found out, I ended it with him and stopped taking my parents' calls. It took my grandmother's intervention to get us back on speaking terms. Ramon moved around the counter, taking her hands. So they have a pattern of this behavior. The question is, what do you want to do about it? Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city skyline. I want to go to brunch. I want to see what they say when they think they need to repair things. And I want to keep playing this game a little longer. She looked up at Ramon. Is that terrible of me? It's strategic, Ramon said. And honestly, after watching them treat you like a child who made a bad decision instead of an adult who chose her own life, I think you're entitled to a little strategic revenge. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Ramon and Emma should do next. They arrived at the Whitmore estate at 11 o'clock Sunday morning. This time, Catherine answered the door with an actual hug for Emma and a warm, if slightly forced, smile for Ramon. "Please come in. We have mimosas, fresh pastries from that bakery in the city you love, Emma. Everything your favorites." The dining room had been transformed into a more intimate setting. Just 4 places set at one end of the long table, fresh flowers, softer lighting. Richard stood as they entered, and Ramon noted the slight uncertainty in his posture. The man was used to controlling every situation, and last night hadn't gone according to his plan. "Ramon, Emma, thank you for coming back." Richard gestured to the seats. "Please sit. Let's start over." The first 20 minutes of brunch were almost aggressively pleasant. Catherine asked about Emma's work at the marketing firm, complimented Ramon's shirt, the same basic button-down from last night, but somehow acceptable in today's context, and talked about a charity gala coming up in November. Then Richard cleared his throat. "I owe you both an apology, particularly you, Ramon. My offer last night was inappropriate. I was concerned for my daughter, and I let that concern manifest in the wrong way." "We just want to understand your plans," Catherine added quickly. "As parents, we worry. Emma is our only daughter. We want to know she'll be taken care of." Ramon glanced at Emma, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. They'd agreed on their strategy during the drive over. "I understand, sir," Ramon said, playing his role perfectly. "If I had a daughter, I'd probably feel the same way. I know I'm not what you expected for Emma." "It's not about expectations," Richard said smoothly, though they all knew it was entirely about expectations. "It's about security, stability, building a future. Which is why we wanted to discuss something with you both," Catherine said, setting down her mimosa glass with deliberate care. "We have a proposal. A real one this time, not," she waved her hand vaguely, "not what Richard suggested last night." Emma leaned forward slightly. "What kind of proposal?" Richard pulled out a leather folder from beneath his chair. "Your mother and I have been talking since you left, and we've realized that perhaps we've been approaching this all wrong. You're married, that's done. And if Ramon is going to be part of this family, then we need to ensure he has the resources to properly support you." He slid the folder across the table to Ramon. Inside was a formal job offer. "Whitmore Development is expanding into tech integration for our properties, smart building systems, advanced security, that sort of thing," Richard explained. "We need someone to head up that division, someone with technical expertise. The position would come with a salary of $185,000 annually, full benefits, company car, and performance bonuses." Ramon read through the offer carefully. It was legitimate, professionally drafted, with all the standard corporate language. It was also a trap. "Dad, Ramon already has a career," Emma said, but her father held up his hand. "Freelance consulting isn't a career, sweetheart. It's a stopgap. This is a real position with a real future. Ramon could build something here, prove himself, and you'd both have the financial security you need." "There's more," Catherine added. "We'd also like to offer you both the coach house on the property. It's 1,800 square feet, fully renovated, and currently empty. You could live there rent-free while you save for a proper home. Build up a down payment. Start your life on solid footing." Ramon looked at Emma, whose expression was carefully neutral, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. This was her family's love language, control disguised as generosity. That's very generous," Ramon said slowly. "Can I ask why the sudden change? Last night you wanted me gone. Today you're offering me a job." Richard had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Last night I was reactive, emotional. I've had time to think, and I've realized that Emma loves you. And if my daughter loves you, then you must have qualities I haven't seen yet. This is an opportunity for you to show us those qualities, to become the man Emma deserves. Translation: this was an opportunity for them to mold Ramon into what they wanted, to bring him under their control, to make Emma's marriage acceptable by making her husband acceptable. What would the role actually entail? Ramon asked, playing along. Day-to-day operations? Preston, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. He'd arrived halfway through brunch, apparently just happening to stop by. You'd report directly to me. I oversee all new divisions. We'd start you in an office at the downtown headquarters, get you integrated with the team, introduce you to our contractors and partners. So Ramon would be working under your supervision, Emma said flatly, with you evaluating his performance. That's how corporate structures work, Emma, Preston said with barely concealed condescension. Someone has to ensure quality control. Ramon could see the entire picture now. They'd bring him into the company, put him under Preston's thumb, use the job as leverage to control decisions about where he and Emma lived, how they spent their money, what social circles they moved in. The coach house would become a gilded cage. The salary would come with invisible strings. And if Ramon didn't perform to their standards, or more likely, if he didn't submit to their control, they'd have grounds to fire him, cut them off, and tell Emma they'd tried to help, but her husband just wasn't capable. It was actually brilliant, in a Machiavellian sort of way. Can I have some time to think about it? Ramon asked. This is a big decision, a career change, moving to the coach house. I'd want to make sure it's the right fit. Of course, Richard said, but there was a hint of impatience in his voice. Plots, I should mention the position won't be available indefinitely. We have other candidates we're considering. I'm offering it to you first out of respect for Emma, but we need someone in place by the end of November. The timeline pressure. Another classic negotiation tactic. Ramon had used it himself dozens of times. I understand. I'll have an answer for you by next weekend. The rest of brunch was superficially pleasant, but Ramon could feel the undercurrents. Catherine mentioned several times how lovely the coach house was, how perfect for a young couple. Preston talked about the tech division's budget, $2.3 million allocated for the first year, with the clear implication that Ramon would have real resources at his disposal. Richard painted a picture of Ramon's future at Whitmore Development, rising through the ranks, eventually making partner, joining the family business in a meaningful way. You could build something here, son. Real wealth, real stability. Within 5 years, you could be pulling in $400,000 annually. That's the kind of foundation that changes lives. Emma was quiet through most of it, answering questions about her own work with increasing brevity. On the drive home, she finally exploded. Did you hear them? You could be the man Emma deserves. Build something real. As if everything you've already built doesn't count because they don't know about it. They're trying to help, Ramon said neutrally, curious to see where Emma's thoughts were going. They're trying to control us. The coach house, the job reporting to Preston, the whole thing is designed to keep us close and dependent. Can't you see that? I can, Ramon admitted. The question is, what do we do about it? Emma was quiet for several miles. Then she said, I think you should take the job. Ramon nearly swerved. What? Take the job. Move us into the coach house. Play the part of the grateful son-in-law who's trying to prove himself. Emma's eyes glinted with something sharp and calculating. I want to see how far they'll go. How much they'll try to manipulate and control when they think they have leverage. And then we show them exactly who they've been underestimating. Ramon felt a surge of love for his wife. You're sure? This could get messy. They're your family. They're my family when it's convenient for them, Emma said bitterly. When I'm playing by their rules, living up to their standards, the moment I step out of line, I'm a problem to be solved. I'm done being their problem, Ramon. I want to be their reckoning. Over the next week, Ramon and Emma refined their plan. He would accept the position at Whitmore Development, perform the role of the eager, slightly overwhelmed tech guy trying to prove himself. They'd move into the coach house, play the grateful children receiving family charity. And in the meantime, Ramon would document everything. Every condescending comment from Preston, every manipulation from Richard, every passive-aggressive remark from Catherine. He'd record meetings, save emails, and build a case for exactly who the Whitmore family really was. When we finally reveal the truth, Emma said one evening as they packed boxes in the penthouse, I want receipts. I want them to see their own behavior played back to them. I want them to understand that their generosity was really just control. Ramon looked around at the penthouse they were preparing to leave temporarily, the space he'd built with his own hands, that represented his actual success. You know we can stop this any time, right? We can just tell them the truth tomorrow and be done with it. I know, Emma said, but I need this, Ramon. I need to fully understand who they are when they think they have power over someone. Because once we have kids someday, once we build our real life, I need to know what kind of grandparents they'll be, what kind of family we're dealing with. The following Saturday, Ramon called Richard and accepted the position. The relief in the older man's voice was palpable. Excellent decision, son. Excellent. Catherine and I are thrilled. When can you start? 2 weeks. I need to wrap up some consulting projects. Perfect. That gives us time to get the coach house ready for you both. We'll have it fully stocked, utilities included. Consider it our wedding gift, since we missed the actual ceremony. The guilt trip was subtle, but unmistakable. Moving day arrived on a gray Tuesday in mid-October. Richard and Catherine supervised the process with thinly veiled satisfaction, directing the movers, that they'd insisted on hiring, to place furniture in the coach house. This is perfect for you two, Catherine said, running her hand along the granite countertops in the kitchen. And you're close enough that we can have family dinners regularly. Really get to know Ramon properly. Emma caught Ramon's eye across the room. They'd brought minimal furniture from the penthouse, just enough to make it look like they'd moved their entire lives. The rest remained safely in storage, along with Ramon's actual life. We can't thank you enough, Ramon said, injecting genuine warmth into his voice. This is incredibly generous. Family takes care of family, Richard said, clapping Ramon on the shoulder. You start Monday. I'll have Preston pick you up at 7:30. He'll show you the ropes. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Ramon and Emma's situation. Monday morning arrived cold and drizzly. Preston pulled up in his Porsche at exactly 7:30, looking annoyed that he had to play chauffeur. Don't get too comfortable in here, he said as Ramon climbed in. This isn't a perk of the job. Dad asked me to pick you up this first week until you get your own transportation situation figured out. I appreciate it, Ramon said mildly. The Whitmore Development headquarters was a gleaming glass tower in the downtown financial district. Preston walked Ramon through the lobby like he owned it, which technically his family did, nodding to security guards and receptionists who all knew him by name. Ramon's office was on the 7th floor, a modest space with a partial view of the city and furniture that looked like it had been purchased in bulk. Preston's office, by comparison, was on the 12th floor, with panoramic windows and custom everything. This is Sarah Diaz, no relation, Preston said, introducing a woman in her mid-40s who managed the building operations division. She'll be your main point of contact for integration projects. Sarah, this is Ramon. He's going to be heading up our new tech division. Sarah shook Ramon's hand with professional warmth, but he caught the flicker of surprise in her eyes when she heard his position. She'd clearly been expecting someone with more gravitas. Welcome aboard, she said. I've compiled a list of our current pain points with building systems. Maybe we can meet later this week to discuss priorities? That would be great, Ramon said. Preston clapped his hands together. Perfect. Ramon, let's get you set up with IT, get your email configured, all that fun stuff. Then we have an executive team meeting at 10 where we'll introduce you to everyone. The executive team meeting was its own form of theater. Richard sat at the head of a long conference table, surrounded by senior vice presidents and division heads, men and women in their 40s and 50s who'd spent decades climbing corporate ladders. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Ramon Diaz, who'll be heading up our new Smart Buildings Integration Division, Richard announced. Ramon is family. He recently married my daughter Emma. We're excited to have his technical expertise as we expand into the next generation of property management. Ramon felt the eyes of every person in that room doing rapid calculations. Family. That explained how someone who looked barely 30 got handed a division. Nepotism, they were all thinking. The boss's son-in-law getting a courtesy position. He played into it perfectly, giving a slightly nervous introduction about his background in tech consulting and his excitement about the opportunity. He saw dismissal in their expressions, patient condescension. They'd seen this before, family members getting positions they hadn't earned, usually failing within a year. Over the next 3 weeks, Ramon settled into a routine. Preston would pick him up each morning with thinly veiled irritation. Ramon would spend his days meeting with contractors, reviewing building systems, and proposing integration solutions that were actually good, better than anyone expected from the boss's charity case son-in-law. The thing was, Ramon actually knew this space intimately. His software company had built systems for smart building management. He knew the technology, the vendors, the common pitfalls. He just played it like he was figuring things out on the fly, asking dumb questions that would occasionally reveal insights nobody had considered. Wait, we're paying $47,000 annually per building for this security system? He'd asked in one meeting, looking confused. I found a vendor that does the same thing for $23,000. Are we locked into a contract or something? The facilities director had actually paused, checked the files, and discovered they were in fact overpaying by double because the original vendor had automatically renewed at increased rates nobody had caught. Ramon saved the company $1.6 million annually with that one naive question. Preston hated it. Every time Ramon's bumbling incompetence somehow resulted in massive savings or efficiency improvements, Preston's jaw would tighten a little more. At home in the coach house, Emma documented everything. She'd started keeping a journal of family dinners, which Richard and Catherine insisted happen at least twice a week now that they were on the property. Your mother asked me 3 times tonight when we were planning to have children, Emma told Ramon one evening after a particularly excruciating dinner. And when I said we were waiting a few years, she actually said, well, you'll want to be financially stable first. Good thing Ramon has a real job now. How generous of me to finally get a real job, Ramon said dryly. And Preston, God, Preston is so obviously threatened by you. Did you hear him at dinner trying to explain blockchain to you like you'd never heard of it? Ramon had designed blockchain solutions for 3 major clients and had been approached to speak at conferences on the subject. But tonight he'd nodded along to Preston's condescending explanation like it was all brand new information. I'm just here to learn, Ramon had said humbly. By mid-November, the Whitmore family had settled into a comfortable pattern of benevolent superiority. They brought Ramon into the fold, were helping him build a career, were teaching him how to be successful. Emma was back in the family circle where she belonged, living on the family property, attending family functions. Everything was going according to their plan. They had no idea that every meeting, every dinner, every condescending comment was being carefully documented. They didn't know about the penthouse still waiting in the Riverside district, or the $28 million in Ramon's investment accounts, or the fact that Emma had started her own documentation project, recording phone calls with her mother where Catherine would say things like, "We just want to make sure Ramon can provide for you properly, darling. A man needs to be pushed to reach his potential." What Richard Whitmore didn't know was that Ramon had also been quietly talking to the Whitmore Development Board members, not as the charity case son-in-law, but as a consultant they'd hired independently to audit their tech spending and integration opportunities. They'd never connected Ramon Diaz, the tech consultant, with Ramon, Richard's son-in-law, because Ramon had structured the consulting contract through his LLC, and the board members who hired him didn't work directly with Richard's division. The audit was revealing significant inefficiencies, outdated systems, and most interestingly, some questionable vendor relationships that seemed to benefit companies Preston had connections to. By Thanksgiving, Ramon had enough documentation to bury them all, but Emma wanted to wait. "The holidays," she said. "I want to see how they are during the holidays. When they're at their most performative, we're such a perfect family." Ramon understood. She needed to see the full picture, to have no remaining illusions about who her family really was beneath the polished surface. The Whitmore family Thanksgiving was scheduled for the last Thursday in November. Catherine had been planning it for weeks, talking about the guest list of 60 people, extended family, business associates, influential friends. "It'll be your formal introduction to our wider circle," she told Ramon and Emma. "Everyone's eager to meet you both properly." What Catherine meant was that everyone was eager to see the daughter who'd eloped, and the husband who was clearly beneath her station, but whom the family was graciously helping. As Ramon drove into the city on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving to pick up some items from the penthouse, he thought about how much had changed in 2 months. He'd gone from successful entrepreneur to the boss's mediocre son-in-law. Emma had gone from independent woman to wayward daughter being brought back into line. And the Whitmore family had no idea they were walking straight into the most expensive lesson of their lives. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom just asked me if we thought about you taking my last name, since Whitmore has better business connections than Diaz. I'm going to lose my mind." Ramon smiled and typed back, "Just a few more weeks, then we show them everything." The trap was set. The Whitmores just didn't know they were already caught. Thanksgiving Day at the Whitmore estate dawned cold and bright, with a kind of November sunshine that made everything look sharper and more real. Ramon stood in the coach house, adjusting his tie, a designer piece that Emma had insisted he wear for the occasion. It was time to start dropping hints. The main house had been transformed into something from a luxury magazine. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables set with china that probably cost more per plate than Ramon's supposed monthly rent. 60 guests would be arriving within the hour. Cousins and aunts and uncles, business partners, society friends, all coming to witness the Whitmore family's traditional Thanksgiving celebration, and to get their first look at Emma's surprise husband. Catherine had been coaching them all week on how to handle the questions. Just keep it simple. You met at a coffee shop, fell in love, got married. Ramon is doing wonderfully at the company. We're all very happy. The subtext was clear. Don't embarrass us. Preston pulled Ramon aside as guests began arriving. "Listen, there are some important people here today. Investors, board members, city council representatives. Dad's going to introduce you around, probably talk up the tech division. Just try not to sound too out of your depth, okay?" "I'll do my best," Ramon said with perfect humility. The first hour was a parade of introductions. Ramon played his role flawlessly, the slightly awkward tech guy who'd somehow won Emma's heart, now being graciously brought into the family business. He watched people's eyes do the same calculation over and over. This is who Emma Whitmore married? Really? Richard's business partner, a man named Douglas Hunt who owned a construction company, actually laughed when Richard explained Ramon's position. Head of Smart Buildings Integration? That's ambitious for someone who just got into the industry. You mentoring him yourself, Richard? Preston's taking him under his wing, Richard said smoothly. We're all invested in Ramon's success. Emma appeared at Ramon's elbow, her smile tight. She'd been cornered by 3 of her mother's society friends, who'd spent 20 minutes asking increasingly invasive questions about the whirlwind romance, and whether they were planning to start a family soon. "Can I steal my husband for a moment?" she asked sweetly. They escaped to the library, closing the door behind them. Emma's composure cracked immediately. "I just heard my mother tell Mrs. Pemberton that they're helping us get on our feet and that Ramon is learning so much from Preston, like you're some charity project they're fixing." Ramon pulled her close. "We're almost there. Just get through today." "I want to tell them now," Emma said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I want to see their faces when they realize—" A knock interrupted them. Richard opened the door, his expression unreadable. "There you are. Ramon, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Anthony Castellanos from the Whitmore Development Board. He specifically asked to speak with you." Ramon felt his pulse quicken. Anthony Castellanos was the board member who'd hired him, through his LLC, to conduct the technology audit. This could get interesting. They found Castellanos in Richard's study, a distinguished man in his 60s, with sharp eyes and a thoughtful expression. He shook Ramon's hand firmly. "Ramon Diaz, I've heard interesting things about your work in the tech division." "All good things, I hope," Ramon said carefully. "Actually, yes. Sarah Diaz, your point of contact, she's been very impressed with some of your cost-saving discoveries. That security system renegotiation saved us a fortune." Castellanos studied him for a moment. "You seem to have a real understanding of building systems integration. Where did you say you worked before joining Whitmore?" "Freelance consulting," Ramon said, aware of Richard listening intently. "Various small businesses, mostly tech troubleshooting." Castellanos looked like he wanted to say more, but Catherine appeared in the doorway. "Gentlemen, dinner is being served. Please, let's move to the dining room." Dinner was its own form of performance art. Ramon and Emma were seated near the middle of the main table, surrounded by family members who peppered them with questions that ranged from curious to condescending. Emma's Aunt Vivian, a woman dripping in diamonds and judgment, asked Ramon directly, "So how does it feel to go from freelance consulting to working for a major development company? It must be quite the adjustment." "It's been a learning experience," Ramon said. "Everyone at Whitmore has been very patient with me." Across the table, Preston smirked into his wineglass. "And living on the property," another cousin chimed in. "That must be convenient. No commute, built-in support system." "We're very grateful," Emma said, her voice tight. "It's generous of my parents to let us stay in the coach house while we get established." Ramon caught the air quotes in her tone, but most of the table missed it. Richard stood, tapping his wineglass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast. To family, to the blessings we share, and to welcoming new members into our circle." He looked directly at Ramon. "Ramon, you've shown real dedication these past 2 months, real willingness to learn and grow. That's what this family values. People who understand that success comes from hard work and guidance from those who've walked the path before you." The table raised their glasses. Ramon raised his, meeting Richard's eyes with a smile that revealed nothing. "To family," he echoed. As dessert was being served, Ramon's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it discreetly, a message from his attorney. "Board meeting moved up to Monday. Full audit presentation. All documentation ready." It was happening sooner than expected. Perfect. After dinner, as guests mingled in the various sitting rooms, Ramon found himself cornered by Preston and 2 of his private equity friends. They'd had enough wine to lose some of their filter. "So Ramon," one of them said, "a guy named Brad who managed a fund worth $200 million. What's your long-term play at Whitmore? You aiming for Preston's job eventually?" He laughed like it was absurd. "I'm just trying to do good work," Ramon said mildly. "That's the smart play," Preston said, his voice carrying an edge. "Know your limitations. Not everyone is cut out for leadership positions. Some people are better suited to implementation roles." "Like Richard said, I'm still learning," Ramon replied, "though I have to say I've noticed some interesting things about the company's vendor relationships, especially in the tech and security sectors." Preston's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Oh? Yeah, some of the contracts seem structured in unusual ways. I've been documenting it for my reports too. Ramon paused deliberately. Well, for the audit. What audit? Preston's voice was sharp now. Ramon blinked as if realizing he'd said too much. Oh, I probably shouldn't have mentioned that. It's probably confidential. He excused himself, leaving Preston looking unsettled. Emma caught his eye from across the room, and he gave her the slightest nod. Time to accelerate the timeline. That evening, after the guests had left and they'd returned to the coach house, Emma opened a bottle of wine, an expensive vintage she'd taken from the main house's cellar. I heard you mention an audit to Preston, she said. He looked like he'd swallowed glass. Ramon told her about the board meeting Monday, about the documentation he'd compiled, about the vendor relationships that would raise serious questions when presented to the full board. It's not just Preston, he explained. Your father signed off on most of these contracts. He's either complicit or negligent, and either way the board needs to know. Emma was quiet for a long moment. This is going to destroy them. My father's reputation, Preston's career, maybe the whole company structure. We can still stop, Ramon said. We can walk away, tell them who I really am, and just move on. No, Emma said firmly. They need to face consequences, not just for how they treated you, for how they've been running the company. If there's corruption or waste, the board deserves to know. The employees deserve better. Monday morning, Ramon dressed in one of his actual business suits, a custom piece that had been hanging in the back of the coach house closet. Emma noticed immediately. Is that? Time to stop pretending, Ramon said, nodding a silk tie. Preston can pick up some other charity case this morning. I'm driving myself. He pulled his other car out of storage, a Tesla Model S that had been sitting in a private garage near the penthouse. When he pulled up to Whitmore Development headquarters, the valets did a double take at the vehicle and the man driving it. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. Ramon arrived at 8:30, meeting Anthony Castellanos and 2 other board members in a conference room on the executive floor. Mr. Diaz, Castellanos said, shaking his hand. Or should I say, Mr. Diaz, the technology consultant, not Mr. Diaz, the son-in-law. Both, actually, Ramon said. I've been working in dual capacities. I hope that's not a problem. A problem? You've uncovered inefficiencies worth millions. The question is whether Richard and Preston know that you're the same person. They do not. Castellanos' eyes gleamed. This should be enlightening. Richard and Preston arrived at 8:50, coffee in hand, looking relaxed. They froze when they saw Ramon already seated at the conference table, dressed like an executive, not their pet project. Ramon? Richard's voice was confused. What are you doing here? This is a board meeting. I'm aware, Ramon said calmly. I'm presenting the technology audit findings. Technology audit? Preston's face had gone pale. You're the consultant Anthony hired? Surprise. The next 90 minutes were a masterclass in exposure. Ramon presented his findings with the precision of someone who'd spent years in boardrooms much more intense than this one. He detailed every inflated contract, every vendor relationship that seemed designed to benefit Preston's connections more than the company, every system that was costing double what it should. The security contracts Preston had approved, overpriced by $2.1 million annually. The building automation systems Richard had signed off on, using outdated technology from a vendor owned by Richard's golf buddy, costing an extra $890,000 per year. The consulting fees paid to firms that Preston sat on the board of, $1.3 million annually for services that were either unnecessary or duplicated internal capabilities. Total waste and potential conflicts of interest, approximately $6.7 million annually. These aren't necessarily illegal, Ramon concluded, but they represent either gross incompetence or corruption. Either way, they're costing shareholders millions. Richard had gone from confused to angry to pale. Preston looked like he might be sick. Castellanos leaned back in his chair. "Richard, did you know that your son-in-law was conducting this audit?" No. No, I had no idea Ramon had this background." "What background exactly does he have?" another board member asked. Ramon smiled. "I spent 8 years building Diaz Solutions, a software company specializing in smart building integration systems. We were acquired 6 months ago by TechCore Industries for $47 million. My background is exactly in the area your family claimed I was learning about." The silence in the room was absolute. "You let us think you were incompetent," Preston said finally, his voice shaking with rage. "You played dumb while you were sabotaging us." "I documented facts," Ramon corrected. "Whether those facts sabotage you depends entirely on whether you are doing your jobs properly, which, clearly, you weren't." Richard found his voice. "This is a conflict of interest. You're married to my daughter. You're living on my property. You've betrayed this family's trust." "I've exposed this company's waste," Ramon said evenly. "As for trust, you tried to pay me $150,000 to leave your daughter. You gave me a job not because you believed in me, but because you wanted control. You've spent 2 months treating me like a charity case while I saved your company millions. So let's not talk about trust." The board members were looking at Richard and Preston with new eyes, seeing not the confident executives they'd known, but 2 men who'd been thoroughly outmaneuvered by someone they'd underestimated. "There will need to be a formal investigation," Castellanos said. "Richard, Preston, I'm recommending you both recuse yourselves from operational decisions until this is resolved. Ramon, thank you for your thoroughness. We'll want you to continue as a paid consultant through this process." "Of course," Ramon said, "though I should mention I've also recommended several qualified candidates to actually run the Smart Buildings division permanently. People with real experience who weren't just hired because they married into the family." It was a direct hit, and everyone in the room knew it. As the meeting broke up, Richard grabbed Ramon's arm in the hallway. "You think you're clever, but you've just declared war on this family, on Emma's family. Do you think she'll stand by you when she realizes you've destroyed her father's company?" "Let's ask her," Ramon said calmly, pulling out his phone. Emma answered on the second ring. Ramon put it on speaker. "Hey, honey," he said. "I'm here with your father. The board meeting just ended. I presented the audit findings, all the waste and questionable contracts. Your dad wants to know if you'll stand by me even though I've destroyed the family company." There was a pause. Then Emma's voice came through, clear and firm. "Tell my father that I've been documenting every condescending comment, every manipulation, every time they've treated us like children who needed to be managed. Tell him I have recordings of Mom asking when we're having children so they can raise them properly since we clearly don't understand what children need. Tell him I know exactly who I'm standing with, and it's my husband, not the people who think love comes with price tags." Richard's face went from red to white. "Oh, and Ramon," Emma continued, "I'm at the penthouse, our actual home. The 3,200 square foot space you've somehow been calling an 800 square foot apartment. I've already moved our stuff back. We're done pretending." Ramon smiled. "See you soon, love." He hung up and looked at Richard. "Any other questions? Make sure you like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought about this story. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one." The fallout was immediate and comprehensive. The board launched a formal investigation that took 3 weeks. Preston was found to have approved contracts with multiple conflicts of interest and was removed from his position. Richard, while not directly corrupt, had been negligent in his oversight and was placed on a 6-month probationary period with significantly reduced authority. Catherine called Emma 17 times the first day. Emma finally answered on the 18th. "How could you do this to your father?" Catherine's voice was shrill. "To your brother. This family took you in, gave you everything." You gave me conditions, Emma interrupted. Love with strings attached. A coach house that was really a cage. A job for my husband that was really a leash. I'm done, Mom. I'm done pretending your control was generosity. We were trying to help you. You were trying to own us. There's a difference. The investigation revealed that Whitmore Development had been hemorrhaging money through inefficient systems and questionable vendor relationships for years. The board restructured the entire operation, bringing in new leadership and implementing the very systems Ramon had recommended in his audit. Ramon's consulting fee for the audit was $850,000, ironically more than Richard's initial offer to make him leave Emma, a fact that wasn't lost on anyone. He donated the entire amount to a nonprofit that helps small business owners access technology resources. The gesture made headlines in the local business press. Whistleblower who exposed Whitmore Development waste donates entire fee to small business charity. Preston sent one text to Emma. I hope you're happy. You married a con artist and destroyed our family. Emma wrote back, I married someone who showed me what real integrity looks like. You destroyed yourselves. 3 months later, on a February evening, Ramon and Emma hosted their first dinner party at the penthouse. The guest list included Anthony Castellanos, Sarah Diaz from Whitmore Development, and several of the small business owners Ramon had helped over the years. People who'd built real success through hard work, not family connections. To underdogs, Ramon said, raising his glass, and to people who don't let others define their worth. To family you choose, Emma added, not family you're stuck with. The conversation flowed easily, full of laughter and genuine connection. No one mentioned net worth or job titles or whose parents owned what. It was exactly the kind of evening Emma had dreamed of, authentic, warm, unpretentious. Later that night, as they stood on the rooftop terrace looking out at the city lights, Emma leaned against Ramon's shoulder. Do you think they'll ever understand? She asked quietly. My parents? That they pushed us away by trying to hold on too tight? I don't know, Ramon admitted. Some people are so invested in control that they can't recognize love that doesn't look like power. My mother called again yesterday, 4th time this month. She keeps saying they want to repair the relationship, but that we need to acknowledge the hurt we've caused them. What did you say? I said I'd consider meeting with them when they're ready to acknowledge the hurt they caused us, when they can apologize without adding, but we were only trying to help, at the end. Emma sighed. I'm not holding my breath. Ramon pulled her closer. You know what the strangest part is? If they'd just accepted me from the beginning, quirky tech guy with a cheap car and all, they would have gotten exactly what they wanted, a son-in-law with money, connections, success. But they were so focused on what I appeared to be that they couldn't see what I actually was. That's the lesson, isn't it? Emma said softly. They taught me that love based on appearances is worthless, that people who only value you for meeting their standards don't actually value you at all. Over the following year, the distance between Emma and her family remained. Richard and Catherine sent birthday cards and holiday gifts, always signed with "Love, Mom and Dad," but never with actual acknowledgement of what had happened. Preston got engaged to a woman whose family owned a hotel chain. Catherine mentioned it in a voicemail, the subtext clear. Look, Preston found someone appropriate. Emma went to therapy to process the grief of losing a family she'd never really had. Ramon supported her through it, understanding that healing from conditional love was its own kind of journey. But there were bright spots. Emma got promoted at her marketing firm to senior coordinator, then to manager. She built a reputation on her own merit, with people who valued her ideas and creativity rather than her last name. Ramon started a new venture, a nonprofit that helps small businesses implement technology solutions at low cost, funded by his own wealth. He hired several people who'd been let go in the Whitmore Development restructuring, giving them second chances at companies that valued competence over connections. And slowly, Emma and Ramon built their own family, not through blood or obligation, but through chosen relationships with people who showed up authentically, who celebrated successes without scorekeeping, who offered help without strings attached. One afternoon in late autumn, almost 2 years after that first dinner at the Whitmore estate, Emma's phone rang with her mother's number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Emma. Catherine's voice was different, smaller, less certain. I've been thinking about what you said, about acknowledgement, about apology without conditions. Emma waited. Your father and I, we're in therapy, couples therapy, and individually, we're trying to understand why we, Catherine's voice cracked, why we almost lost you completely. Almost? Emma said carefully. I'm hoping we haven't, not completely. A long pause. You were right, about all of it. We tried to control you because we thought that was love. We judged Ramon because he didn't fit our image of what you deserved. And we almost destroyed the relationship with our daughter because we couldn't see past our own arrogance. Emma felt tears prickling her eyes. Mom, I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I'm not even sure we deserve it. But I wanted you to know that we're working on becoming people who might deserve a relationship with you someday, if you're willing, when you're ready. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Emma told Ramon about the call that evening. He listened carefully, then asked, What do you want to do? I want to think about it, Emma said. I want to see if they can actually change, or if this is just another manipulation. But Ramon, I think I want to leave the door open. Not wide open, not unguarded, but maybe cracked. Then that's what we'll do, Ramon said. On your terms, at your pace. 6 months later, Emma agreed to meet her parents for coffee, not at their estate, but at a neutral cafe in the city. Ramon came with her, not as the poor son-in-law they'd tried to fix, but as her partner and equal. Richard and Catherine looked older, more uncertain. They shook Ramon's hand with genuine respect this time, no dominance plays or condescension. Thank you for coming, Richard said, both of you. The conversation was awkward but honest. Richard admitted to the board investigation revealing blind spots in his leadership that went far beyond Ramon's audit. He'd been coasting on past success instead of adapting to new realities. Preston had moved to a different company and was reportedly doing well, having learned some hard lessons about earning respect rather than demanding it. Catherine talked about the therapy, about realizing how much of her identity had been wrapped up in controlling her children's lives. I thought I was protecting you. I was really just protecting my own idea of what your life should look like. I'm working on forgiving you, Emma said carefully, but I need you to understand that our relationship will never be what it was. It can't be. That version was built on me trying to earn your approval. This new version has to be built on mutual respect. We understand, Catherine said, and we're grateful for the chance to try. As Ramon and Emma walked back to their car after the meeting, she leaned into him. That was harder than I expected. Healing usually is, Ramon said, but you did great. Clear boundaries, honest communication. I'm proud of you. Do you think they'll actually change, long term? Ramon considered the question. I think they're trying. Whether they succeed depends on their willingness to do the hard work when no one's watching. But that's on them, not you. You've given them an opportunity. What they do with it is their choice. 2 years later, when Emma and Ramon announced they were expecting their first child, Catherine and Richard's response was measured and respectful. They asked how they could support, offered congratulations without demands, and didn't push when Emma said they'd discuss grandparent involvement when the time came. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still occasional backsliding into old patterns. But there was also growth, effort, and genuine attempts at change. The real victory, Ramon reflected, wasn't in destroying the Whitmore family or exposing their flaws. It was in teaching them, and himself, that real wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or property holdings or family names. It was measured in authenticity, in relationships built on truth, in the courage to be yourself even when people wanted to reshape you into something more convenient. Ramon Diaz had $28 million in the bank, successful businesses, and a penthouse in the city. But his real wealth was the woman beside him who'd chosen integrity over comfort, the chosen family they'd built together, and the knowledge that he'd never again let anyone make him feel small just because they couldn't see his worth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living authentically and watching people realize they underestimated you. Not because you proved them wrong with flash and drama, but because you proved them irrelevant by building a life that didn't need their validation. And that, Ramon had learned, was the sweetest victory of all. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.